All right, so following up on my first impressions, I've just finished Requiem twice now. I went back after my break. I did clear through the rest of the game on classic, normal, standard mode. And then that took me like all day. I binged the whole thing in one day. I went to bed, woke up today, and I just finished playing it again on standard modern this time because I wanted to see what kind of differences there were in the difficulty. Because I got the impression that there would be more than just the ink ribbons, which is what the game presents it as. I'm not sure about that, but I'll talk more about it. And also, replayability is a really big factor for Resident Evil games, so I wanted to see how it was to replay the game, what New Game Plus was like, and I'm glad that I did because I have a couple notes on that regarding the gameplay section here. But I guess I want to start by talking about the story because I really didn't touch on it in the last video, primarily because there hadn't been a whole lot of story as of that point. This game backloads a lot of the really important plot revelations. The stuff you get up until the end is kind of setting up the premise of this game, and then at the end they're like, okay, here's the big lore drops that affect the series, okay? And going into this game, I had a lot of expectations and a lot of hopes relating to the fact that it's called Requiem. That word, I think, has a lot of weight behind it. When you name something that, there's a sort of a gravitas that you give it. And I was hoping that it would live up to that. And especially when they revealed that we'd be going back to Raccoon City. I was, in my mind, I was hoping that this would kind of be like the Avengers Endgame of Resident Evil, right? That we'd see a lot of returning characters and that we would wrap up a lot of existing plot threads here in this game. Now, unfortunately, that's not really what happened. We didn't really wrap up a lot of existing plot threads, and there really are not a lot of returning characters. So I'm a little disappointed about what we didn't get there in terms of that not happening. With that said, I was pleasantly surprised about what did happen here. This game is batshit insane. And this will be full spoilers. But there was no way I think anyone would have predicted the events that happen in this game. And to its credit, I think it lives up to the name of Requiem and to that gravitas, but in an entirely different and unexpected way. It kind of wraps up the Raccoon City story and era. And this game kind of acts like the Resident Evil 5 for Leon. Resident Evil 5 was said to be the culmination of like the Stars saga, like Chris and Wesker's story. And it was that at the time in a lot of ways. Obviously now, in retrospect, maybe not so much. But this game kind of feels like that for Leon, and for also the recent remakes and all these RE Engine titles. It does feel like the end of an era in a lot of ways and a celebration of a lot of different games in the series, a lot of the lore in the series. And it does suggest maybe that we might move on to something new here. Although, of course, it keeps doing this all the time, right? But if we take it on its face, it does seem like this is the end of something and the beginning of something new. And so that's great. I'm just a little disappointed with some of the small details here. And that's kind of the overall through line of this review is I think Requiem's a good game. I'd say, I don't really like numbers, but I'd say that it's probably like an 8 out of 10, somewhere in that range, right? It's a good game. And of course, 5 being an average game, not a bad game, right? Like some fucked up scales use. I'd say it's an 8 out of 10, and it drops the ball in a lot of small details. And regarding the story, my problems are that we're back in Raccoon City and we're focusing a lot on Leon's story, and he even has Sherry as his backup, his girl in the chair instead of Hunnigan like he normally does. And that's a cool attention to detail here, and that's a really great choice for this. Except there's no mention of like Claire at all. She never comes up. And if she's mentioned in a file, I missed that file or I didn't read that file, okay? Claire isn't mentioned at all, and that seems like a really weird omission that she never gets mentioned at all. That seems odd. And there's another omission that seems odd when Leon encounters footage of Xeno and then later encounters Xeno himself. There's no mention of Wesker. No one ever names Wesker. Leon doesn't say, that reminds me of Wesker, or this guy kind of looks like Wesker. Sherry doesn't say, this guy's face matches Wesker's face, because, like, I mean, I don't think Sherry ever met adult Wesker, but, like, adult Wesker's face had to be known, okay? That had to be on file somewhere. People had to know what he looked like. And, like, Chris would have told people what his powers were. Chris fought Wesker several times, including after he had the ability to fucking dodge bullets. So when he starts dodging bullets and he starts teleporting around and shit, and he's wearing sunglasses in the day, right? It's weird that that Leon doesn't take note of this at all. It's kind of odd. It's just a small little odd exclusion that feels almost intentional. And I don't understand, because otherwise the entire game is like this overt celebration and homage to all kinds of things in the series, right? I mentioned in my previous video, several boss fights were callbacks to previous boss fights. And that was only halfway through the game. I finished the game now, and it gets even crazier. Like, this game, when you get to Raccoon City, it feels like at that point, the game, at least this is how I interpret it as someone who is still jaded about the Resident Evil 3 remake, the entire section in Raccoon City feels almost like an apology for Resident Evil 3 remake, because this is kind of what I wanted the Resident Evil 3 remake to be. It's a little taste of that, and it's a really good taste of it overall in terms of the exploration and things like that. And then you fight Victor Gideon in the final boss fight, and I didn't even think about it at first in the first phase, but then when the second phase shows up and Leon's like, it's a nemesis, and I'm like, oh fuck, this is remake Final Nemesis. And then I thought back and I'm like, wait a minute, that was just like the form of Nemesis with the tentacle arm that we never got in the remake. That's insane that they just added that boss fight that 3make didn't have because it was cut for some stupid fucking reason. They just added it into this game. That's insane. And then, of course, the final boss fight is literally just Final Nemesis from 3make. Like, arguably the best part of that entire game, stuck in an otherwise really bad game, right? That's crazy, okay? So in a game full of homages, and then of course, Mr. X shows up again, you fight a version of the Super Tyrant, and it's a really cool fight because in the original RE2 remake, he has a move that will instant kill you if you get hit by it. Here, Leon can just parry that shit. He can just parry everything. Super Tyrant's a joke. He's a bitch, right? He means nothing. It's great. It's hilarious. It just seemed odd that it's almost intentionally didn't name drop Claire or Wesker, but then at the end they went out of their way to name drop Chris a couple of times, and it makes me wonder like what their plans for DLC here are, because they're almost certainly going to sell DLC. Like they just would have done that anyway, I think. But I saw a picture about the Steam chart numbers. This game has like double the active player base right now that any Resident Evil game has ever peaked at on Steam. It's kind of crazy. The game is selling really well. It's doing really well. They're definitely going to sell DLC, and I think Mercenaries has already been confirmed. So I'm really curious what they're planning to do with that. And of course, I really hope that they finally embrace Mercenaries for what it's supposed to be. But I was supposed to be talking about story. I got a little sidetracked talking about what's not in the story. So the story itself is kind of batshit. It goes off the rails in the back half. Because it starts doing a lot of sort of deep lore cuts, which I think people did expect going in with the initial theories. This is like some Umbrella Corps type shit. And then it starts doing some retcons, because basically the premise of this story is that, one, everyone who was in Raccoon City was actually infected with the T virus, like probably an airborne strand of it, that remained dormant for like 40 years, right? Okay, and now it's actually becoming active solely over time and killing them. It's infecting them. And that's the curse of Umbrella that Leon and Sherry are infected with. And this is why not name dropping Claire is weird, because presumably she would also be infected by this. So it's weird that there's no mention of her at all. That's why that's weird. As well as why it's weird that there's no mention of Jill, because if we assume RE6 is still canon, which we'll get into, then Sherry has G virus in her, and that gives her some kind of virus healing ability. And she's still affected by the T virus, the curse here, okay? So that means Jill also probably isn't immune to this, right? There's no mention of either of those characters. And there's an implication that like everyone who is in Raccoon City could be affected by this. And also that includes Ada, who also is not here or name dropped at all. Again, really weird exclusions. But that's the premise, that everyone's affected by this, including Leon. But Spencer, at some point near the end of his life, or arguably even halfway through all of this virus bullshit, started to regret what he was doing and started working on a even more top secret project. Like even like you think Hive and Hive 2 were underground in Raccoon City? Go down a couple layers deeper than that, and now you're in the Ark, okay? And Ark is where he's working on this Elpis project named after like the Greek goddess of hope. And Elpis is an antiviral. It's like the ultimate antiviral, except he didn't tell anybody that. He intentionally spread rumors and misinformation about it being the ultimate bioweapon that could control minds, which misled like his protege, which is in this case Gideon, who also at some point was always or became a nemesis type tyrant, and Zeno, who is a clone of Wesker, misled both of them into believing that this was the ultimate bioweapon that could control minds. And the only way to unlock it was through like a genetic memory of a password that only Grace Ashford had as Spencer's biologically engineered child, okay? That's the plot of this game. And so the reason that they kidnap Grace is so that they can get her to enter the password that they assume that she has genetically encoded into her brain or something. Because if they get it wrong, the whole thing will fucking self-destruct, right? That's insane. That's fucking nutso. And then the twist is, and the twist I didn't believe because it's so out of left field, is that actually that's wrong. That's not the case. Spencer legit just felt bad. This is actually just an antiviral, and you're supposed to release it because it is just an antiviral, and that's the good ending, and it will fuck over Zeno, who is absolutely convinced of the wrong thing, okay? But I didn't believe that because the last time we heard from Spencer or we saw from Spencer, he was still just a dick, right? Like there's no precedent for this. This is kind of a crazy retcon that maybe Grace would believe because she has no prior knowledge like we have. But that was also part of my consideration. I was like, I feel like this is they're manipulating Grace into doing what they want her to do. I feel like they're actively manipulating her into trying to make her think that Spencer was a good guy, right? But it's a crazy plot. And then the fact that it's just a password that she still has to guess at, by the way, because she doesn't actually know, because she's actually just a normal person, just a normal girl that Alyssa Ashcroft adopted after talking to Spencer while he's in some who God knows where, right, before Wesker offs him, okay, assuming that RE5 is still canon, which I'm starting to think, I've always had this theory that they were going to rewrite the canon. I did not think that 5 and 6 especially, if they got remade, would survive as they are. I very much believe that now. They have always walked this line of the remakes and the original games being kind of equally canon until there's direct contradictions, and they don't often contradict each other. But now I think we're at the point where they are directly contradicting each other with information that's being delivered, especially here with Requiem saying that actually Spencer was he was remorseful at the end of his life, and so he did just create this super antiviral that now might exist moving forward, right? The connections has actually existed the whole time, and so they could have been involved in any event up until now. And in fact, they were also involved in the destruction of Raccoon City. That wasn't just the US government. So given that information, right, by the time we get back to Resident Evil 6, if we do that game again, that game's going to be wild, right? And the fact that there are now officially Wesker clones, that has implications for Resident Evil 5, I think. And the fact that there was a Wesker clone here also, I was hoping that they would go somewhere, again, with Alex Wesker and the memory consciousness. And that's why I was willing to believe that the super weapon of mind control existed, because it kind of lined up with Alex Wesker's research into consciousness transferal and things like that. But again, it doesn't seem like we've mentioned Alex Wesker at all, or there has been any. I'm not sure what they're planning to do with that, if anything at all, right? But this plot is completely insane. And there are a lot, like I said, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. A lot of intentional ones and maybe some unintentional ones. And I think that there could be answers still in the game, because I think that there's still a mystery in the game that people are solving, a really complex, the final mystery related to some obscure clues throughout the game. Maybe there's an answer or two hidden behind that. Like, for example, the ARC, part of its project is trying to create clones of Grace, because they think if they create clones of her, they can get the password from them. But that doesn't work, so they end up with all these failed clones, and that's what the child Emily is. But at one point, you control a clone of Grace, and you're running away from like other failed clones who have turned evil and have red eyes, and their skulls have been cut open and stitched back together. But there's no explanation for that. Like, what is that? What's happening there? There's no explanation for that at all. That's really weird. And again, like, who else has the Curse of Umbrella, right? Like, when did Wesker make these clones? Did Wesker make these clones, or did someone clone Wesker? Are there other Wesker clones? Like, so there was always a theory that we didn't kill the real Wesker. That was always a theory. But now that's actually somewhat plausible, because Wesker clones are legitimized in the series. There's a lot of questions that this kind of creates. And so I'm really curious where we'll go with this, right, in terms of the plot. It's really interesting, and I am happy with what we got, but I am still disappointed with what we didn't get. I'm open to seeing what the DLC offers here, but I don't know. I don't see where the ending, it name drops Chris a couple times, and the implication might be that it revolves around Chris and his wolf squad. I pray that's not the case, because I think we've had enough fucking Chris, right? Unless that DLC somehow involves Chris and manages to tie the events of this game back into the Winter Saga, which I'd actually be okay with, because I'm still unclear why we did the whole Winter's duology thing, right? If they can take that as an opportunity to tie the Winter stuff and the Metamycete and the mold into what's happening right now, and they can tie this all together in a nice bow, and maybe reintroduce Rose as, like, if Leon was supposed to be the mentor to Grace and she's a new protagonist, and Chris is supposed to be the mentor to Rose and she's a new protagonist, even though Rose kind of got fucked over with her DLC, maybe I'd be happy with that. But otherwise, enough of fucking Chris Redfield. Enough fucking Chris, please. Can we get anybody else? I still want to know where Claire is. Jill, please, for the love of God, this would be a perfect opportunity to properly apologize for Resident Evil 3. Give us a Jill DLC where she goes back to Raccoon City for whatever reason, and she relives her, like, PTSD in the city, like the way that Leon was reliving his guilt. That would be great. Okay, that would be a way better DLC. Now, moving on to the gameplay, in my first impressions, I had said that I was really enjoying the Grace gameplay. But by the time I got to the Leon section, I was frustrated with his gameplay because I didn't really understand what the game wanted from me. And while I have finished it twice now and I'm better at the game, my core complaints haven't necessarily changed. I'm a very sort of gameplay focused person, and I'm a very detail focused person. And I think one of the problems with the remake games is that they emphasize a sense of realism and trying to convey horror and fear in the third person gameplay, as opposed to being tight mechanical experiences like Resident Evil 4, 5, and frankly, even to an extent 6 were, the original games. So what this results in is these inconsistent sort of RNG-based things that you can't control, where like the dynamic difficulty scaling is super aggressive and people need to min-max around it when they're doing speed runs. These mechanics where like you can escape from zombies, but only if you're running at the correct angle at the correct time when they grab you from the right distance, right? It's not really in your control. It's just a weird thing that happens sometimes. These finishers that are hard to do because they only trigger at close range and only when the zombie's a certain amount of health, but you don't know what health that is. Zombies don't stagger after one bullet like they used to. They stagger inconsistently because, you know, they don't want you to be in too much control. It's all these little things that are really frustrating for me. And this game has a lot of that too. And especially, again, I'm so used to playing Resident Evil 4 Remake now with mods that resolve a lot of these problems. Playing the base game here without mods highlights a lot of them. So, like, one of the issues with Leon is that you can't fucking see anything. When you play this game in third person as Leon, he takes up so much of the goddamn screen because the camera is zoomed in so far. Especially when you aim, like, he takes up the entire left side of the screen. If there's an enemy anywhere in the left side of the screen, you aren't going to be able to see them. And that's a problem because the game is constantly spawning new enemies everywhere. That's just a thing that happens. So when you can't see anything because the FOV is zoomed in so far, you're going to take hits that you couldn't have anticipated. You can't parry stuff you can't see coming because the FOV is just so zoomed in. And then when enemies get close to you, yes, you can parry. And the parry is really strong when it works. Except the parry has always been inconsistent. This has been a problem since RE4 Remake, where Leon's knife is able to parry like ridiculous bullshit. Like he can parry a chainsaw, but he can't parry everything. Like if a pillar's falling on him, he can't parry a pillar because like, oh, well, you know, logically, he can't parry a pillar, right? Except sometimes he can parry shit like that, right? So as a perfect example, in this game, he can parry Final Nemesis. What sense does that make? What exactly is he parrying? This massive tyrant that takes up the entire goddamn room is dropping its entire claw on top of him. What exactly is he doing with that axe that lets him avoid all damage? Like, I would love to know what exactly he's doing there. That's psychotic. But then he can't do that all the time, right? That's not something he can do consistently. So for like example, when you fight Super Tyrant, I don't think you can parry the cars, right? Super Tyrant can just knock a car your way super fast, either directly fling it toward you or he'll fling it up and then it'll drop down on you instantly. And it'll do most of your health. You can't react to it. There's no dodge command. There's no reaction command. You can't fucking parry it. I'm pretty sure you can't parry it, right? Even if you could, how am I parrying a car, right? It doesn't make sense. Similarly, even though you can parry Final Nemesis, I don't think you can parry Plant 43. Why not? Why, if I can parry Final Nemesis, why can't I parry Plant 43? Now, maybe I just happen to never be able to parry Plant 43. I just fucked it up every time. But that I was able to parry, Final Nemesis every time. I don't know. but it seems like it's really inconsistent when you can actually parry things. Furthermore, the parry's great, but I just don't think that it's enough. If you watch Leon in cutscenes throughout the entire series, Leon is agile. He's mobile. But the way that the parry forces you to play is as this stalwart tank that's always facing directly forward. If you ever turn your back on something to move away from it, you're opening yourself up to being hit and to being grabbed in such a way that you're completely defenseless. It's counterproductive to try and make space with something because when it inevitably hits you or grabs you, you can't parry it, right? But Leon has no mobility option. So when something closes the distance on you, so for example, when you're fighting the first form of Victor Gideon as the final boss here, and he's swinging a tentacle at you, yeah, you can parry his attacks to not take damage, but the distance between the two of you is still closing in to the point where you're right next to him, and you can't see behind you, so you don't know how close you are to the wall. So you want to get away from him, but you can't turn and run because then you're going to get smacked. So you have to like try and back up slowly while continuously parrying him, but it doesn't work that well in my opinion. And this is the problem I ran into with the spider, where you can't these massive creatures that have really fast movement time or really far reach or both. Leon just has no tool to get away from them. You're a slow moving tank, and you're a really durable tank. You're a really strong tank, but you're a slow tank, and it's really frustrating. So this is why one of the most popular mods for Resident Evil 4 Remake is a mod that gives Leon a sprint and a dodge roll and several other mobility tools because they feel so natural for his kit and they feel like they're necessary for the game. Even in 4 Make, this was a thing that people felt like he needed because, yeah, you could parry weapons, but the most dangerous Ganado in that game were the ones that didn't have weapons because back in Resident Evil 4 Remake, Leon could not parry grabs, right? If an enemy came out with you without a weapon, that was dangerous because you couldn't parry them. Now, supposedly, you could duck that enemy to avoid the parry. To avoid the grab. That's what the game said. It's bullshit. It barely ever worked. It was really janky. But if you add like a dodge roll or a barrel roll or whatever so he can quickly duck and dive out of there, suddenly it's a lot smoother of an experience and it's a lot more fun and dynamic and you actually feel way more like Leon, okay? Same thing with stunning enemies. So replaying the game, in the beginning of the game, at least on normal modern, because I do think that there's a difference, but I need to test and quantify this. Right now it's just vibes. On the beginning of the game, shooting an enemy in the head does consistently stun them as Leon. And what I didn't realize even as Grace is that shooting him in the leg was like a guaranteed stun. This has never been the case before, basically ever, okay? Even in like old Resident Evil 4, you couldn't do it as consistently as you could here, okay? But shooting an enemy in the leg as Grace was a consistent way to push them, and shooting an enemy in the head as Leon was a consistent way to kick them in the beginning. But basically, as soon as you get to Raccoon City, that shit goes out the window. The zombies in Raccoon City are just built different. And it becomes harder to get melee stuns with your gun. Now, what I didn't do in my first playthrough, which maybe contributed to my pain, what I did not do was ever upgrade my Alligator Snapper to the Silencer 9. So, I think the Silencer 9 is just a straight up better gun than the Alligator Snapper. Now, that's without the third tier of upgrades, because I still only have 24 of those raccoons, which pisses me off. I need to go back and find the last one that I missed somehow. But without that last tier of upgrades, at least, I think the Silencer 9 is definitively just a better pistol than the Alligator Snapper. And if you're able to upgrade it all the way, then I think it has way more damage. Like, it just has more damage, and I think that makes a big difference in terms of your ability to kill enemies with the pistol without even needing to worry about the stun, and its ability to secure headshots, and its ability to secure stuns in general. I think that these are important factors, at least on like standard modern. I want to play like a fresh new game again on normal classic, but the game makes that a little difficult with the way the modern RE engine games work. But I'm going to try to test that to the best of my ability, or wait until mods come out to kind of prove this with numbers. But it seems like some weapons are just better than others. So I didn't even upgrade my shotgun for a while. But then I tried upgrading my weapons, and I think, frankly, some weapons are just better than others. Like, the weapons you start with just aren't very good. And so upgrading them is essential. And if you upgrade them, you're going to have a way better time. That's my understanding. Still, though, I don't think it's reasonable for it to take as many shots as it did for me my first playthrough to be able to like stun or kill enemies with basic weapons. Now, regarding the upgrade system here, it's actually really unique for this. It's not like Resident Evil 4 where you have these sort of long series of upgrades over multiple playthroughs, or, for that matter, Village. It's a unique system that's kind of more, I almost hesitate to say roguelike, but it's more run-based. And I actually kind of like it in a way, because you start with nothing, but you get points from the beginning. And so you can choose what you want in terms of arsenal and upgrades every playthrough. And I think in a way, this actually encourages you to try out and experiment with stuff way more than the other system of needing to grind a bunch of money in every playthrough and maybe sell some stuff and constantly cash stuff in your inventory. It's a good system, and I'm quite fond of it. It's a little straightforward. It's a little simple, and I'm not a fan of locking the third tier of upgrades behind a requirement like finding the raccoons, because even just in my second playthrough, just having the one upgrade that gets me more points for killing enemies, I got nothing to spend these fucking points on, because I can max out so early that by the end of the game, I got nothing to spend the points on. So I really wish that wasn't the case, but otherwise, I'm quite a fan of the upgrade system, actually. I'm also a fan of Grace's gameplay systems. Okay, so the blood collection system is actually really fun and interesting. There's something really fun about collecting blood and using it to craft stuff. And the way that it's balanced to make you think about, oh, do I want ammo? Do I want these hemolytic injectors that are kind of expensive but very useful? And then how do I want to use the hemolytic injectors? How do I want to plan out my route? Do I want to use them preemptively to avoid enemies that are probably going to be in my way? Do I want to use it to assassinate powerful targets to get them out of my way, or to get coins, or to get upgrades, or to get other resources? Do I want to spend 3 of them to kill this chunk that's in my way, which I did my first playthrough, which I did not do my second playthrough, and in retrospect, is definitely not worth doing aside from getting the charm and the achievement, right? That thing is so easy to dodge. It is not in your way at all. Not worth the investment on anything other than, an achievement run. I really like her blood upgrade system, and it's fun throughout the entire game. My only problem is that it feels like Grace is supposed to have a final boss fight. You can, again, at least on normal mode, you can take out everything. The whole game, you can kill basically everything. And the threat of the blister heads is a little overstated. Most enemies will never turn into blister heads. And even if they do, you have the Requiem and you can take enemies out with it. You have the hemolytic injectors, you can take enemies out with them. The game gives you plenty of resources. I mean, Resident Evil has always been claimed to be a survival horror game, but as soon as you understand the economy of the game, every Resident Evil game offers you the economy required to kill everything and still come out plus, right? This has been a running joke for me forever, where I have a screenshot of me playing Resident Evil 2 for the first time ever, the original Resident Evil 2, my first B run as Claire. And I'm walking into the final boss fight as a one-woman army, okay? It's a joke, right? As soon as you understand these games, the economy is always on your side. But it feels like she's meant to have a final boss fight. All she gets is a couple of hallways full of lickers. And Lickers are cool, but they've never been the most threatening enemy because you can just stealth past them, right? That's their critical weakness. And she's never even forced to fight them. Leon has always been forced to fight Lickers. There's always a situation, even in the original Resident Evil 2 remake, where he's forced to fight Lickers. And he has to do it under-equipped, right? Because Claire had the acid round that just put them on the floor. His shotgun did nothing to them. Here, his shotgun's more effective. He has the parry, whatever. But she's never even forced to fight them. If you are careful, you will never have to fight a Licker. So she has no kind of climactic ending or way to use her resources. And for that matter, once she gives the Requiem back, all she ever has is her pistol, and she can throw acid and Molotovs. But there's not that much to throw them at. It's just a little disappointing. You know, I kind of wish that she had a climactic boss fight. My personal copium is that whatever the secret is that people are figuring out will lead to one. That's pretty copium. I don't think that's the case. But that would be pretty cool. And I do hope that, like, she's playable in Mercenaries and she has a cool kit and maybe equipped with Molotovs and acid and some other cool weapon, right? But right now, it just seems a little disappointing the way her story wraps up with no climactic end or real true like test of her resources, at least on the standard difficulties. And, you know, on that topic, the reason I'm consistently questioning the standard difficulties is because historically Resident Evil has easy, normal, hard, and then sometimes insane or professional, okay? This is what Resident Evil 4 did. But that's not the case here, okay? And I don't understand this because my first playthrough felt really hard. My first playthrough here, and I was restarting a lot just to try and perfect things, to learn things. I wasn't dying necessarily. But my first playthrough felt really challenging and like I had a lot of obstacles I was butting up against, okay? But I'm not sure that it's going back playing it again. I had so little tension, and this was on Modern, and it was on New Game Plus though. I'm just not sure that the jump to Insanity makes sense. I feel like there should be something else. And if there is a difference beyond the ink ribbons, which only applies to Grace, by the way, I don't know why they would label it this way. I feel like this game needs a hardcore mode, and maybe that's just what they should have called Standard Classic. Because that's what I felt like I was playing, was hardcore. And then Insanity is the equivalent of professional. But, you know, whatever. So overall, I mean, I enjoyed the game. The difficulty reminded me of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where I struggled a lot my first time, but I thought it meant that there was a lot of room for mastery, and I think that is the case. But one obstacle here is that there's no chapter select, and there's no mercenaries. So there's no way to like play exclusively as Leon. There's no way to play exclusively as Grace. There's no way to really test your action gameplay skills. There's no way to test your stealth skills. That's missing. I think they've already promised Mercenaries is coming, and I hope that's the case. But I kind of hope that they add like a chapter select or a chapter challenge feature that lets you like speed run or to go and do in a row all of Grace's sections and all of Leon's sections and skip all of the other bullshit, right? Because, so replaying the second time, I had completely forgotten about the orphanage section where you have to control the little girl Chloe, I think, right? Awful. The orphanage section in 2-Make was always one of the most painful parts to replay because it's just like 5 minutes of scripted waiting. Right? And there's nothing you can do. There's no tech. There's no speedrun strats. There's nothing you can do to make it fun or interesting. You just have to sit around and wait for the AI to do its thing so you can get back to the game that you actually want to fucking play, okay? It's always super painful, and that made RE2 harder for me to play, at least as Claire. And that's why I always appreciated like Resident Evil 4, because it didn't really have this. The worst Resident Evil 4 remake had, I think, was Del Lago, because Del Lago went on way too fucking long. But I install a mod to skip Del Lago. That's easy. You know, you can just double the damage and it's easier, okay? People have a hard time skipping the orphanage section in 2. People might have an equally hard time creating a mod to skip the orphanage section here, but I gotta tell you, it was a real killjoy when I got to it here. And same deal with fucking House Beneviento in 8. I really like 8, actually. But House Beneviento kills my vibe every time I get to it. Because again, it's just like 5 or 10 minutes of walking and scripted bullshit and nothing that's so uninteresting to do. And I don't know why Capcom keeps putting these same sections in here. I know that they're popular on a first playthrough, and I know that they're good experiences the first time. I'm not saying they're not. But why is it so hard for them to add a fucking skip button? Once you know the pattern, once you know the solution, you will never lose. There's no fail state. It's not even possible. Like, it's so scripted, just give me a skip button, right? Why can't they build that in? They have learned from other things about these other games that they've done. Like, Leon has invincibility frames during his animations now, which thank God. Imagine if he didn't have invincibility frames during like his throwing and his axe attack and his melee animations like in Formake, right? Imagine. It would be insane, okay? So they have learned some lessons. But why do they refuse to learn this one? Why do they always undermine the replayability of their games with these awful sections? And that might sound petty, but like, when people can speedrun your entire game in 2 hours, a 5-minute section of sitting around and waiting or following a completely scripted path and sequence of events is really boring and uninteresting, okay? It's really shitty. It might as well be a 5-minute unskippable cutscene. At least if it was a 5-minute unskippable cutscene, I could set my stopwatch, walk away, do something else, and come back, right? Rather than forcing me to sit here and waste my time on this bullshit section. That's a problem that I have. So I wish that I could play exclusively Leon sections. I wish I could play exclusively Grace's sections. I wish there was a Mercenaries mode here at launch. And I wish I could skip this goddamn orphanage sequence, okay? Some other sort of topics here. In the arc, Leon fights some actual human soldiers with guns, okay? This game has zombies with guns, and I have never liked this. I didn't like it in 5. I didn't like it in 6. I don't like it here. But I'm kind of okay with it because they're a little bit fair in a way. They have a telegraph. You can get behind cover as long as you can shoot them in the head. It's fine. I have some complicated feelings on this section with these enemies because I tried to like actually stealth this out with the axe the first time, and I was here for like an hour trying to do this, okay? It was not fun. They are surprisingly easy to shoot. You would think that they're wearing a lot of body armor that makes them hard to shoot. That's not the case. They're really easy to shoot. But I don't like this. It turns the game very briefly into this really a hardcore cover-based shooter with very little margin for error. And I'm just not a fan of it because the game doesn't have the mechanics to back this up. You know, in the same way that some of the small details about melee combat fail this game, this section really falls short because it doesn't have the mechanics to back it up, right? Like, the enemies respond instantly to seeing you, and there's just not a lot that you can do to stop them, okay? I'm just not a fan of this. But maybe I'm still missing something. And it's kind of worth it because, frankly, the boss fight with Hunk is incredible. It's a crazy hype moment. It's a crazy fan service moment when he shows up. It's a great fight. It's pretty short when you do it correctly, but it was also pretty hard the first time I played it, which again makes me think that the difficulty I played first was hardcore because the second time I did this, on my second playthrough, I did it my first try. I was here for an hour my first playthrough, okay? This guy's a tough motherfucker. but it's a great fight. It's an awesome moment that finally makes this character. He's always been canon, right? But he's never really done anything significant other than being involved with the Birkin thing and then being the quote unquote fourth survivor, which means increasingly less every game in the series, right? But this was a great moment. He does that thing where he notices Leon is sick, so he doesn't shoot even though he was kind of about to. He puts, he has a little bit of respect for Leon. It's a cool, great fight. If he does kill you with the neck snap, he does the hands thing that they gave him in the remake, which I feel like they gave him in the remake just so that they could do it here and make it confirm that this is Hunk. Some people aren't sure why they don't call him Hunk, and I think that's because Hunk is more of a code name for us players. I'm not sure that he's actually called that in game that much, right? In the universe, I don't think people call him Hunk that often. He's like Mr. Death, the Reaper. People don't refer to him as Hunk that frequently. It's a nickname, a code name that the players gave him or that he has kind of at a higher level. It's not like his actual fucking name he goes by all the time, right? So it makes sense that he'd just be the commander. And it kind of explains where he's been and why we haven't seen him. This was a really cool, unexpected addition. And it's incredibly badass that Leon beats him, especially while sick, which I think that says that Leon's insanely skilled. I don't think this is any kind of discredit to Hunk's skill. This just means that Leon's a fucking monster. Leon is universal. This guy is way too strong, okay? If Leon wasn't actively dying in this fight, it would have been over instantly, right? He would have had no chance, okay? Great moment. All right, so, last thing I want to talk about is what I want to see from this game. So obviously, I'm expecting some kind of story DLC. I'm not even going to bother trying to speculate on it because the story itself was so out of nowhere. But I really want Capcom to wake up to the fact that the sort of multiplayer or live service moneymaker that they have always wanted is right here, okay? It's called the Mercenaries. They have built a system that at least I don't think the combat system is some kind of pinnacle combat system, but it has enough style and flair and enough substance that you can build on this and turn this into a really interesting Mercenaries mode. The main failing of Mercenaries in 4-Make was that it was stuck on standard difficulty, okay? It wasn't very challenging. They made it super easy. But if you install a mod to make it harder, then it's actually really engaging, especially if you start adding in the dodge roll and other kind of mechanics to modify it, okay? It's a really interesting game mode, right? I want them to do that here. I want them to make Mercenaries the best it has ever been here. I want them to bring us all the fucking characters. If you have to sell them, then sell them. Sell me Claire, sell me Jill, sell me Wesker, sell me Xeno, right? That could be a skin. Sell skins. How many fucking outfits can you sell for all these characters? They had no problem doing this for fucking Resistance, this game that nobody played, nobody wanted, nobody asked for, nobody liked, that was shut down. It was delayed for a year, and then it shut down after 6 months or some stupid shit like that, right? They had no problem giving you a season pass and selling you fucking Battlesuit Jill and all these other skins. But they have never tried to capitalize on the single most popular mode they have in the fucking series, other than, maybe raid mode, okay, right? But I feel like this game actually has the potential to do both. This game could have an Ethan must die type mode, Grace must die, and you could expand on that. You could make it a seriously really interesting roguelike type mode. You could have a legitimate Mercenaries type mode that has a live service element selling characters and costumes, because the player base is here. If you deliver Mercenaries fast enough and you deliver it good enough, you can maintain that player base. People are still playing fucking RE4 Mercenaries, 5 Mercenaries, 6 Mercenaries. People love fucking Mercenaries. I don't know why Capcom hasn't figured this out and why they're so insistent on trying to sell all this other bullshit to people that they don't want. And it would be a great testing ground. They could just introduce co-op right here. We know they're working on it. We know it's going to be in 5. We know they're working on it. So just fucking drop it here, introduce it here in the Mercenaries, and it would double your player base. It would double your sales, right? Because, people love playing with their friends, right? Imagine playing as fucking Grace and Leon back to back, doing some badass shit. I thought for a second that was going to happen in the game when Leon and Claire were, or when Leon and Grace were in the same room. I thought for a second that we were going to get into some co-op stuff. They've hinted at this a couple of times now, like when Leon and Luis were in the same room, okay? And doing the mine section. They've been hinting at this for a while. Just do it. And sell it. Like, there's so much money to be made here, and you can make the players so happy. They'll be happy to, like, please. I'm literally asking you to take my money. So I really want Capcom to figure this out. It would make me very happy, okay? But overall, Resident Evil 9 Requiem is not at all what I expected, but I can't say that I'm unhappy with it. I'm satisfied with what it is. I am, of course, just disappointed with what it isn't. But if they have, clearly they have the right ideas, right? And the fact that they seem to want to make amends for, at least the way I'm interpreting it, that want to make amends for RE3. The fact that they are kind of doing this greatest hits of all these RE engine games. I think they've got a lot of the right ideas here. And if their idea is to maybe do this same kind of thing again with like Code Veronica and 1 and 5 and then 10, that could be really fucking cool, okay? And maybe that game, maybe then Jill would finally get the spotlight again, right? Maybe Jill and Claire could finally... Okay, I'm going to stop, right? I'm hyping myself up too much, right? But overall, good game, some questionable design elements, some questionable story choices, but I mean, that one's really genuinely just par for the course with Resident Evil. Looking forward to mods to fix some of the questionable gameplay design. Looking forward to DLC for this game to further flesh out what is already a pretty good package. So as I am nearing completion of the video, editing the footage together and capturing that footage, some other thoughts occurred to me that I wanted to add into the video, so I'm doing so now as sort of an addendum to the video. I realized that I had forgotten to talk about like the characters themselves sort of in depth at all, and I had some further expanded thoughts on the difficulty and the mechanics of the game as I've continued to play, and as some mods have started to come out that have allowed me to sort of look into the game a little bit. So I want to talk about the characters, and let's start, of course, by talking about Grace, our new character. I really like Grace as a protagonist. One of the issues I had with 7 and 8 is that I just didn't think Ethan was that interesting of a protagonist, right? He was just the newest in the series of like sad dad protagonists, kind of, I guess, protagonists that we've been getting in video games for a long time. And they, for some reason, also decided that he was faceless. So along with the first person thing, he was faceless. Even when there would have been a reason to see his face, they always kept it out of sight. And they made his personality fairly generic, right? He had some reactions to things, but all things considered, the way he kind of didn't respond to the shit that happened at the beginning of 7 kind of set the tone for who he was as a person. He just really wasn't that interesting other than being like a driven husband and father, right? And that's fine, but it's just not that compelling. And even if he was, he's dead now, so it doesn't really fucking matter, right? But Grace is really interesting because she has a very clear and defined arc in this game that sets her up as a potential future protagonist, one of several now at this point, right? They did this with Moira. Arguably, they did this with Rose. That's questionable. And now they've very much done it with Grace, where at the beginning of this game, she's not just scared of the monsters. She can't even look her coworkers or the random cop guarding the crime scene in the eye. She doesn't even make eye contact with people. she is a wallflower. She is so scared. She is so like reserved and shy. But by the end of the game, the events of it have transformed her entirely. She has gone from this shy, meek, and very messy person, that's a small detail with her desk, to being a very confident, together, neat, organized kind of person, very confident. And also, she's gone from being like the daughter of a murdered mother to being an adoptive mother herself, right? And that's actually also really cool. What's also really interesting about Grace, and again, paralleling Ethan in a way, is that Ethan was set up to be like kind of an everyman who ultimately turned out to be sort of a superhero or a chosen one type character, because he was actually a mold all along, right? That twist they did with him where he was sort of a chosen one and he was really important, or his kid was really important, that was interesting, but it kind of undermined the everyman aspect of him. Here they've done like the opposite thing, where the entire game they set Grace up as this chosen one. And there's a moment in the game where like she's about to crash out because Zeno has been telling her these things, and now she thinks she's like a production, another clone, another genetically modified baby. And she's starting to have like almost like cloud type crash outs. The screen is flashing. Leon shows up and she like reaches her hand out. And I legitimately thought they were about to turn her into Alice from like the movies, okay? Because I feel like they'd kind of been setting that up the entire game, not just with the Chosen One status they gave her, but with the Apocalypse skin that they gave her, with the setting, and with a lot of the other decisions that they had been and that they went on to make, that sort of made this game analogous to those Anderson movies, okay? But then she just passes out. And I'm like, oh, okay, what the fuck? But then you find out, actually, we're doing a Rise of Skywalker here. And there's really nothing special about her at all. Or rather, The Last Jedi. There's nothing special about her at all. The Rise of Skywalker would be the exact opposite. There's nothing special about her at all. She is just a normal girl. Everyone was misled. That's really interesting that she sort of subverted the Chosen One archetype, but still managed to do something really important and to become like a really capable, confident person and character. And I think her competence in gameplay is also really important. So she shows her smarts in the cutscenes, like getting out of her shackles at the very beginning. That was pretty clever. But I think some of her abilities in gameplay help endear the player to her. Like just simply her ability to push zombies out of her way. Like, this isn't something that protagonists have been able to do in survival horror, like, historically. You think back to the older Resident Evil games. If it would be so nice if, like, the original Resident Evil 2, when a zombie staggers backwards, if you could just push them out of your way instead of having to use another bullet on them, right? So the fact that she can do that, it's like, wow, that's really nice that she's able to do that. Whether or not it does damage is irrelevant, and actually the fact that it doesn't do damage can be beneficial when you consider like the blister heads, right? Grace is a great protagonist. Her voice acting is great. I'm really happy with this. The only thing I want is that I want her to be playable in Mercenaries, and I kind of want them to like. I would actually really like if they had two versions. Like, if they're not going to do like a Grace Must Die type mode, then give us like Meek Grace, like beginning of the game Grace, and then give us end game Grace, who is more capable. Maybe after she's been spending some time with Leon, she's been doing some FBI field training. Give us like a super agent version of Grace that we can play as in the Mercenaries, where she has her own melees and she can parry. That would be really fucking cool, okay? But that's enough about Grace. Moving on to Leon, the current super agent. Leon's pretty cracked in this game. He's a really enjoyable character. He is so checked out. It's almost amusing how detached he is from like what's happening to him. He has a quip and like a smart remark for basically everything that happens, even after like he watches Zeno brutally murder a squad of BSAA guys. He has a smart remark about it, and I'm like, holy shit, Leon. Like, Jesus Christ, calm down, dude. And he really isn't bothered by a whole lot, but he's still like, when a giant spider shows up, he's still like, oh fuck, I need to get out of here, right? So it's not like he's completely stoic and he has no reactions to things, but he always is confident about what he's walking into, regardless of what it is, and regardless of how batshit it is. He doesn't hesitate. He will happily ride a motorcycle up a fucking ruined building and drive off of it. He will happily ascend a ruined building and walk over glass panes, suspended in the air. This shit doesn't bother him at all. It's really amusing, just the actions that he takes. And the fact that he's doing all of this while, like, he's 50 and he's, like, actively dying of the T-virus infection, the man has, like, no fear, right? It's really interesting. But I guess the reason that he's doing all of it is ultimately just because he's driven by this sense of guilt and responsibility that he has literally never gotten over. There's a kind of a hidden line of dialogue. You have to explore all of Raccoon City to get it. Where Sherry asks if he still thinks about the events of that day. And he's like, every day. He thinks about it every day. And while you're exploring, you see flashbacks of Marvin, you see flashbacks of Kendo, the people that he couldn't save. These things still haunt him today. And this, I don't know why they did this. This is extra fucked up, but there's a side quest you can do, finding letters, that reveals that Marvin had a daughter, which I don't think we ever knew, and she died that day too, because she was trying to, like, get to her dad, and then he told her to go away because the police station was dangerous, and she ended up, I think, alone, like, next to Kendo's shop is where she died. And that was Leon probably, like, passed right by that happening, is what these notes sort of suggest. And that's just another gut punch for him this whole time, that he finds these notes and be like, that's just another person that I couldn't save. And he's like, I'm sorry that I was too late to save you, That's fucking insane that, one, the game even did that at all. And two, that he still carries this guilt, like, 30 years later over events that he realistically couldn't have possibly done anything about, right? But that's his motivation to do all of this and to become, like, this insane badass that does all of this crazy shit, right? You can't help but be endeared to it, right? You can't help but love Leon. And it does seem pretty clear that his quipping is it's like his only coping mechanism, right? It's the only thing that he can do to sort of deal with all this. With that said, he goes on and on about saving people, but I feel like a lot of people die under his control. Like that first section, I try to save people in that first section. It's really hard to save people in that first section. It's basically impossible to save anyone, let alone everyone. And even in the hospital, he does sort of let that woman get chainsawed, right? Now, that woman seems pretty sus. Like, she seems pretty... I think everybody working there knows what's going on, right? I don't think there's a lot of people working at that place that don't know what's going on, so she probably wasn't a great person or an innocent person, but still, Leon definitely could have done something to keep her from getting chainsawed. So it's the whole, like, he needs to save people thing. I think he might be selective about who gets that treatment, right? But maybe that just has to, go into the cynicism and the brutality of how long he's been doing this, right? But Victor Gideon, really interesting antagonist. So going back to my thought about this game being sort of an apology for Resident Evil 3, the reveal at the end that he's a nemesis is kind of interesting. I don't know how that works. I don't know if he's a person who got the Nemesis parasite implant. I don't know if he's just a really advanced Nemesis, tyrant. I really don't know. They suggest he is a real person who's been around for a while and has actually been involved with the company and has been running the center for a long time. There's a lot of questions around that, but if we just take it as it is, that's pretty cool, and it kind of explains why he's so powerful and he's so good at tracking people, although good at tracking people is questionable because, Nemesis could find Jill, like, every 5 minutes, and it took him, like, 27 years to find Grace. But, you know, complications, right? I'm not sure. But he's a really interesting antagonist, and him having like a personality and being there to like kidnap rather than to kill, and to sort of manipulate her and to get her into Ark and to release Elpis. I think that's really interesting. And again, it feels like maybe a little bit of an apology for what we didn't get with Nemesis and RE3, the fact that he is around the whole time. And it almost feels also like a little bit of an apology for what they did with Heisenberg and Lady Dimitrescu in Village, where there were these really cool antagonists who both got sidelined for a way less interesting protagonist. And they didn't do that here. Like, they kept him around from beginning to end, and that was a really cool decision. My only question is, I don't really understand the plan, right? So if they need Grace specifically alive for the password, what was the plan, right? They kidnap her, and then the first thing they do is they put her in a like an isolated area with a monster that wants to eat her head, right? And the whole time he just leaves her there with all of these monsters that want to kill her in the most horrible ways. So what was the plan if at any point Grace died? They need her alive, right? She's supposed to be the chosen one, the special one. They need her specifically, and if she dies, she's irreplaceable, okay? So what was the plan? I mean, it doesn't seem like forging her into the person she is at the end of the game was like a hard requirement for this to work. It just seems like they were taking on a whole lot of unnecessary risks. And for that matter, you know, she does get bit at the very beginning of the game, right? That first zombie cop bites her, okay? This is a canon event. It's not gameplay. This is story, right? And then she has that injury the whole game, right? But she never turns. And in the beginning, that seems like it could be related to her being special or chosen, okay? You don't question it in the beginning because everyone's like, oh, you're special, you're chosen, whatever. And maybe he did something with her blood in the beginning too. But then later it's revealed, oh, she's not special, she's normal. Okay, question, how did she never turn? Gideon shoots people with this gun and they turn into zombies instantly. And then like a minute later, it's complete panic in the streets. There's like a million zombies, right? How the fuck does that work? And then, you know, even Leon, he's not turning, but he has symptoms. We don't know how long he's been dealing with this, but he has visible symptoms of the T-virus infection. Grace has none of this. What's happening exactly? Like, did she get infected? Did that zombie... How does this work? Why is she not infected by that bite? And what happens if she dies? These are questions I have about the plan, but the whole plan is so stupid and ridiculous that I'm really not going to spend a whole... They're just questions. I'm not that worried about it. Zeno was kind of the only other major character here, and he's really cool. He looks amazing. That is an incredible drip. The guy knows how to dress. But he is sort of wasted, right? They introduce him and they suggest that he's a clone of Wesker, even though they don't say that outright. Nobody even names him as Wesker. And by the way, I wanted to mention this too. It was weird that nobody, like Leon, Sherry, nobody says, hey, you remind me of Wesker. But then at the end of the game, somehow Leon is able to immediately identify, oh, hey, you're a nemesis. What? How the fuck are you able to do that? How the fuck are you able to immediately identify this monster as a nemesis? And then you can't identify that this dude's dodging bullets like Albert Wesker was infamous for doing. Who also happens to look exactly like Albert Wesker and you know, canonically sounds exactly like Albert Wesker, right? How does that make any sense? But, you know, aside from that, he's really cool. And if this is a suggestion that we will be getting more Wesker in a lot of different ways, because now, like, the Wesker that gets killed in 5 maybe is a clone, or even if that's the real Wesker, other Weskers can show up in other places. I guess that's cool, but I'm never really going to get over some of the existing plot threads that they haven't done anything with. So, like, they've already, they've set up Grace as a new protagonist here, but, like, they already did this with Revelations 2. What about Moira Barton? Okay, where is she at? Where's Barry? Where's Natalia? Where's Alex Wesker? Right? Why are there's clones of Albert Wesker, and Alex Wesker is transferring her consciousness between bodies. There's a lot of weird shit going on with these Weskers, okay? And then meanwhile, the Ark is just cloning babies for, like, as it's revealed, literally no reason. Kind of a waste of a character. Maybe he'll be the topic of DLC. But that's kind of the same thing I have to say about Sherry, is she's here. It's nice to see her. But, like, she doesn't really do anything. Maybe she'll be the topic of DLC, because there's a lot of questions I have about Sherry, right? This is the first time we're seeing Sherry in the RE engine as an adult. And so it leads to a lot of questions, especially the fact that she's suffering from the T-virus infection. If 6 is still canon, 6 established that she has regenerative healing from the G-virus infection that she got and then got antibodies from. So that obviously doesn't make her immune to the T-virus, okay? So if that's true, then that means Jill also should not be immune to the T-virus by a similar logic. Now, unless maybe, she got infected with the T-virus and then she got an antibody to the T-virus, maybe Jill specifically gets a pass on this one. But otherwise, everybody else in Raccoon City should have been affected by this curse or by this T-virus dormant state that, is now active. But again, we don't get any reference to any other person who was in Raccoon City, including Hunk, by the way. Hunk was in Raccoon City. He's not sick, but again, maybe his gas mask protected him. Who the fuck knows, right? But I was going to say he works in Elpis. He works in the facility, but then again, no one knows that it is an antiviral, so I'm not sure. Then again, maybe there's other T-virus, and I don't know. Hunk's a complicated one, okay? But there's something about Sherry that is really interesting, is that apparently in the concept art, she and Leon both have a ring on their finger. And obviously it would be stupid to say that that's like a wedding ring for Sherry. I don't think Sherry's married at all. Although, sure, she could be married to Jake, who we haven't seen in this engine at all, maybe. And sure, Leon could be married to someone who would be crazy, but sure, okay. I think it's actually possible that the ring means something else. Especially the fact that Leon and Sherry both wear the same ring on the same finger in this game specifically, and the concept art makes a point of that. The fact that is the case, I don't think there's a connection between the two of them because they're not married. That would be ridiculous. So it has to mean something else, okay? So what does it mean? I think it means something about all of the people who are connected, like all of the protagonists, basically. And that ring could be the fact that Leon, there's an animation at the end, he specifically puts the ring back on. I think it could suggest that ring and the people who have it are relevant to what happens next. It could be part of the DLC, right? So maybe we will see Claire and Jill or someone else show up who also has that ring, right? Maybe Claire has that ring because it means it's for Raccoon City survivors, or it's for those 3 specifically. I would still find it weird that Claire is never mentioned as far as I know, unless I've missed something. Or maybe she is mentioned and that explains the ring. I don't know. But I think the ring is relevant. Of course, it could genuinely just mean that Leon is married, and sure, maybe Sherry's married too. I just find that one a little bit harder to believe. I guess the only other character worth mentioning is Emily. And Emily is cool, I guess, right? Little blind girl. She's fine. We don't get a whole lot of her. More interesting, actually, is Chloe, because you'll see earlier in this video, Chloe does a fucking perfect parry against one of those evil children that tries to grab her, which I find hilarious. That one had potential. It's a shame about her. And I really don't understand the point of that section. That is an entire 5 to 10 minute section of me wasting my time that then in the end turns out, oh, you lose anyway, right? Don't get killed for 10 minutes and then in the end you get killed anyway. Why are you wasting my fucking time, Capcom? But I think that's all the thoughts I have on characters. So just some additional thoughts on the difficulty and the mechanics of this game. So I speculated that classic or standard classic was not just a difference of ink ribbon. The game presents it as a difference of ink ribbon. I don't think that's true. So when you beat standard classic and probably also standard modern, you unlock insanity. And that tipped me off that this mode is probably not just another version of normal. And also the fact that I struggle bust my way through that mode so much. I felt, the vibes told me this mode is harder, but I didn't know that. There is now on Nexus, the modders are doing great work. It's been 3 days, there's already a bunch of mods on the Nexus. The modders have already put out something that lets you see and freeze the difficulty adjustment in the game using the RE framework. And so using this, I have confirmed basically that normal modern seems to start at 4 and normal classic seems to start at 6. And classic caps out at 8 while modern caps out at 7. Now, this isn't exact science, but that's what I seem to have been able to figure out based on loading saves and playing around a little bit. And the importance of this is that the difference between 7 and 8 is actually really significant. So at difficulty adjustment 8, you as the player deal half damage, and enemies are staggered at 50% likelihood or 50% rate, whatever that translates to. Meanwhile, you as the player take 3 times damage. 7 is a fraction of that, right? I think it's like 0.7 for damage that you deal and the stagger rates, and at most 2 times enemy damage, right? I didn't pay that much attention to the 7 rates because they weren't that aggressive to me. The rates at DA8 are crazy. So what this means is, when, as usual with RE Engine games, and this is why I suspected this because I've played enough of these fucking games to know this, whenever you start doing well on classic standard, DA8 comes around and it kicks your ass back down. It just makes sure to kick you in the ass a little bit, a nice swift punt to the nuts, because that's insane. And this explains why it felt like my guns weren't doing anything, because they literally weren't. My gun was doing half the damage, and its ability to stagger the enemy was crippled, literally cut in half, okay? I think that's crazy. And that's difficulty adjustment 8. And I assume insanity is levels 9 and 10, although I recall in Resident Evil 3, it could actually go above that. It said it capped out at like 10, but then it could actually go to 11, 12, and 13, I think, is how RE3 at least worked, okay? I'm not sure if other games are like that. I can't even imagine what insanity is like if you're doing less than half damage, taking more than 3 times damage, and enemies stagger at less than half the normal rate. That sounds pretty fucking psychotic to me. I'm not looking forward to doing that. Okay, that sounds pretty bad. Something else I was also experimenting a lot with was like how to stagger enemies. So when I was replaying on when I was playing on standard modern, I started experimenting with how I can try to stagger enemies. And at one point, I thought I had discovered a cool trick, and a cool mechanic even, where if you shoot a zombie in the head and they sort of do a pseudo stagger that happens sometimes, like, the force of the bullet knocks them back a little bit. I thought I had discovered that if you do that and then you immediately follow it with a heavy axe attack, the one where he spins, that consistently resulted in an opportunity to kick the enemy, which would then allow you to finish them off with the axe. For a while, that seemed to work, at least on standard modern. In Raccoon City, okay, against enemies during the free roam exploration section. That seemed to work consistently for a while. I don't know if I was just getting lucky. I don't know if there was something about the difficulty adjustment or what. But I don't think that's true. At least not on classic standard because when I tried that on standard classic, this is really hard to say. I'm sorry. When I tried it on, I'm gonna just call it fucking hardcore because I think that's genuinely what it is, and what they should have fucking called it is hardcore mode. When I tried that on hardcore, it didn't work. I just got my ass grabbed over and over again because you swing into the enemies, they don't get stunned, they don't take any damage, and they just immediately grab you. Like, they weren't grabbing before, they instantly grab you, right? There doesn't seem to be any tech or strat to grab enemies. I thought there was, and I was willing to give the game that. I don't think there is anymore, okay, unfortunately. So again, maybe there is to be discovered. I'm not sure. But luckily, there's already a mod on the Nexus to control the damage you deal via headshots and the stagger rates that headshots do. So once I've collected my achievements and I finish doing what I need to do, I'm just going to install that fucking mod, okay? And I'm going to be like, all right, well, if I shoot you in the head, I expect you to kind of reel back so I can kick you, right? That is how I would feel more satisfied playing this game personally, especially if and when, you know, we get the Mercenaries mode. So I think that would wrap up all of my thoughts at this point. I'm going to get back to, you know, finishing editing this video. Thank you for listening to my extended review here, and hopefully you enjoyed the footage. That's all I have to say about Resident Evil 9 right now.